She laughed in his face, a billionaire CEO mocking the only black mechanic in a hangar full of silence. "If you can fix this engine," she smirked, "I'll marry you." But when the jet failed mid-air, the world saw who saved her life and who she tried to erase. What started as a joke became a firestorm, because what he uncovered inside that engine was never supposed to be found. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Terrence Miles had worked beneath fluorescent hangar lights for nearly 8 years, tucked behind rows of private jets owned by people who never knew his name. He didn't complain. Not out loud, anyway. His job was to keep metal birds in the sky, not to be seen, not to be thanked, and certainly not to be heard. Each morning, he clocked in at Hallberg Aviation Solutions, one of the nation's top luxury aerospace firms, where billionaires stored their jets and CEOs played gods. Vanessa Hallberg, the woman who founded and ruled the company like an empire, had never looked him in the eye. Not once. Terrence had walked right past her a dozen times. He held the hangar door once when her heels clacked across the marble floor. She didn't nod, didn't blink, just glided by, as if he were an automated door panel and nothing more. It wasn't that she was cruel. She didn't have to be. Indifference did the work. Terrence was a third-generation mechanic. His grandfather fixed engines in Louisiana when black men weren't even allowed inside the front door of the plants they worked for. His father, James Miles Sr., opened the first black-owned repair shop in their neighborhood. A tiny garage that survived off loyalty and handshakes. Terrence inherited his gift but not the freedom to use it on his own terms. College scholarships fell through. Business loans mysteriously didn't go through, so he found work wherever he could. And now, here he was, grease-stained overalls, clipboard always in hand, eyes always down, making jets work for the elite, knowing damn well most of them wouldn't sit next to him on a flight if they didn't have to. He kept to himself. He knew the rules. But everyone in the hangar knew. If something was truly broken, they called Terrence. Not for praise, not for gratitude, but because he got it done. That Thursday began like any other. The desert sun crept across the Nevada sky, shadows of palm trees spilling across the tarmac. Terrence was under a Gulfstream 6T50, elbows deep in a hydraulic line that had burst from poor maintenance, something he'd flagged weeks ago, and been told to leave for the senior tech. The senior tech, Logan, was 27, and had once asked Terrence if spark plugs worked the same on jets as they did on Hondas. Logan also made 3 times Terrence's salary. Terrence didn't argue. He just fixed it. Halfway through the repair, a low whistle cut across the hangar. Heads turned, phones lifted. Vanessa Hallberg, flanked by 2 assistants in tailored suits, marched toward her jet, a custom Falcon 8X she called Valkyrie. White, sleek, silent and cold, just like her. Terrence didn't look up, but he noticed the hush that followed her. It was always the same. The world bent around Vanessa. Doors opened, men straightened. Even the weather seemed to hesitate. She stopped at the bottom of the jet's stairs and turned sharply. "Fuel up in 15, she said. "I want wheels up in 30. The co-pilot gave a stiff nod. "Yes, ma'am." Terrence kept working, hands steady, but something tugged at him. A whisper of something off. It was the left auxiliary power unit. A faint vibration, barely audible. He glanced over. His cart of tools sat only 10 feet from Valkyrie, close enough to hear the hum. It wasn't normal. He stood slowly, wiped his hands, and walked toward the jet's rear, careful not to look like he was snooping. Logan spotted him and rolled his eyes. "Don't start something," Logan said. "That's her baby." Terrence ignored him. He crouched beside the APU vent, placed 2 fingers near the panel, and listened, then felt it. A pulse. Off rhythm. Just enough to mean danger. He reached for his flashlight and unscrewed the panel bolts. The second it came off, a gust of burnt heat hit his face. The compressor was overcycling. One wrong switch, and the engine could stall mid-air. Terrence straightened, headed toward the flight team. "You need to delay the flight," he said to the co-pilot, a short man named Brent. Brent frowned. "I wasn't aware there was an issue. There's a pulse imbalance in the APU," Terrence explained. "It's subtle, but it's pushing heat to the turbine at dangerous levels. I just took the panel off." Brent laughed awkwardly. "Look, I'm sure you're good with engines, man, but this jet was cleared this morning by the senior team." Terrence's jaw tensed. "I'm telling you, it's not safe." Vanessa turned at the sound of raised voices. She walked over, arms crossed. "Is there a problem?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Terrence met her gaze for the first time. "Ma'am, I believe your auxiliary engine is misfiring. I'd recommend a full diagnostic before takeoff." Her assistant shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Terrence Miles. Mechanic. 8 years here." She smirked. "Strange. I've never heard your name once." Terrence didn't flinch. "I don't usually cause problems. I fix them." She glanced at Brent. "Was this flagged?" "No, ma'am. Everything checked out." "Then we're leaving." "Now." Terrence took a step closer. "I understand the urgency, but if that engine stalls, your backup may not kick in fast enough at altitude." Vanessa exhaled slowly, looking him up and down like an unsightly smudge on glass. "Let me be clear, Mr. Miles. I've flown 10,000 hours on this jet. I've flown through lightning storms, Gulf hurricanes, and Vegas airspace. I trust my team, not the guy who hides behind bolts and wrenches." And with that, she turned and boarded the jet. Terrence watched the stairs rise, the hatch seal, the turbines roar to life. He said nothing, just walked back to his bench and sat down. 32 minutes later, the jet was airborne. And 11 minutes after that, the emergency alert went off. Valkyrie was descending. Fast. The auxiliary unit had failed. Mid-air. It wasn't enough to kill the engines, but it was enough to destabilize cabin pressure. Enough to make Vanessa's private pilot declare an emergency and reroute to a small airfield outside Barstow. By the time the jet rolled into Hangar 6, the sun was hanging low and red in the sky. Terrence stood by the open tarmac, arms folded, silent. Vanessa emerged, face pale, lips drawn tight. She walked past everyone, straight to the bench where Terrence sat. "You said the APU was faulty." "I did. And you were right." "I was." She looked at him for a long moment, then laughed, sharp and cold. "Well, Mr. Miles, if you can fix that engine for good, maybe I'll marry you." A few chuckles erupted from the crew behind her. Terrence didn't smile. He stood slowly, walked toward the jet, and placed one hand on its still warm metal skin. "I'll fix it," he said. But what he didn't say, what he couldn't, was that the real problem wasn't in the engine. It was deeper. Something no one else had seen. Something that, if left alone, could destroy the entire aircraft. And Vanessa Hallberg had no idea. Because as Terrence unscrewed the first panel, he saw a hairline fracture no one else had caught. Not even the flight engineers. The question wasn't, can he fix it? The question was, why was it there in the first place? Vanessa Hallberg had founded Hallberg Aviation, with the kind of precision most people only applied to war. Every move calculated, every weakness leveraged. At 42, she was the youngest woman to be listed on the Fortune 100, and the only one whose company had no co-founder to credit, no father's money, no husband's name. Just grit, steel, and the sharpest tongue on any executive board. She didn't tolerate mistakes. She didn't entertain small talk. And she certainly didn't believe in second chances. Her mantra was simple. If they're quiet, they're replaceable. And in her empire, men like Terrence Miles didn't exist. Not because she actively dismissed black men in maintenance, but because she never once acknowledged them. They were part of the machinery, part of the background noise humming beneath her luxury world. So when she walked past him after the emergency landing, lips curled into a smirk, her voice laced with biting amusement, her words weren't meant as recognition, they were meant as entertainment. "If you can fix that engine for good, maybe I'll marry you." She said it loudly, deliberately, in front of the crew and senior engineers. A few laughs followed. One assistant choked on his coffee. The PR manager looked down at her shoes. Even Brent, the co-pilot, cracked a grin and muttered, "Well, that's one hell of a prenup clause." Vanessa basked in it, in her ability to disarm, to humiliate, to turn the serious into a punchline. But Terrence didn't laugh. Not because he missed the joke, because he saw something in that engine that scared him. "I'll fix it," he said, voice calm, measured, eyes still on the metal panel he just removed. There was something unnatural about the fracture, a diagonal split running across a reinforced bracket, where heat stress alone couldn't have caused it. And it wasn't just hairline. The crack was deep, hidden under 2 layers of plating. Deliberate. She tilted her head, intrigued by his composure. "You always this serious? Might be why nobody's heard of you." He looked up then, meeting her eyes without flinching. "You don't have to know someone for them to matter." Something in his tone, soft but firm, respectful but unyielding, made her pause. Only briefly. But she covered it with a scoff and turned away, heading toward her office built into the side of the hangar. Clock's ticking, Mr. Miles. Hope you're better with tools than you are with charisma. The silence that followed her departure felt heavier than her words. Logan chuckled nervously, muttering something to a junior tech. No one dared repeat the bet she'd just made, but the energy in the room had shifted. Terrence wasn't invisible anymore. He was under the spotlight, and not the good kind. He crouched by the exposed panel, eyes narrowing. Every bolt told a story. Every scrape and weld had its own fingerprint. And what he saw now didn't just worry him, it chilled him. This wasn't natural wear and tear. It was sabotage. But who would do something like this? And why? He checked the diagnostic sensors, all bypassed. A patch job had been done just days ago. Whoever covered it up had wanted it to fail. After takeoff. After clearance. After Vanessa was already in the air. And yet no one in the team had caught it. Or, they had, and kept quiet. Terrence took a breath, pulled out his personal notepad, not digital, never, and jotted down every anomaly he found. Sequence numbers, heat patterns, a strange discoloration near the fuel relay. That's when Logan walked over, arms folded. You really gonna try to fix that? After what she said? Terrence didn't look up. I don't work for her jokes. I work for the truth. Logan snorted. Come on, man. She was kidding. Don't take it personal. That's the problem, Terrence said, tightening a bolt. Y'all think it's never personal. Logan hesitated. You know what I mean? No, I don't think you do. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. But something inside Terrence had cracked too. Not out of ego, but out of realization. He had spent nearly a decade, blending in, thinking his work would eventually earn respect. That his silence was a form of dignity. But silence in a place like this only became confirmation. The kind they used to pretend you weren't there. He worked through the afternoon and into the evening. Refused lunch. Declined help. Pulled open the full APU schematic and ran a test cycle twice. Every result came back stable, after his patchwork. But it wasn't enough. He needed to know why the break was there in the first place, and how deep the cover-up went. By 9:30 p.m. most of the hangar was empty. Lights dimmed. Security walked slow loops near the rear gates. Vanessa's jet gleamed under halogen fixtures, like a beast awaiting resurrection. Terrence placed a call to a friend, Julian Cole, a forensic aviation consultant, who owed him a favor, told him to run the part numbers against repair orders from the past 2 months. While waiting, Terrence ran his own query in the company database, using his restricted maintenance login. Most files opened fine, except one. Repair code, VX, access, denied, admin only. He frowned. This code was tied to Valkyrie's last maintenance check, 3 weeks ago. Why would a routine repair be admin locked? He clicked again. Same result. Just then, the door behind him opened. Footsteps. He turned. It was Vanessa. She wasn't dressed like earlier. Gone were the heels and blazer. Now she wore a gray hoodie, yoga pants, and sneakers. Her hair was tied back. No makeup, no audience, just her. And him. I thought you'd be gone by now, she said, voice even. Terrence stood slowly, wiping his hands. Engines still open. She walked closer, stopping a few feet from the exposed turbine. You really think someone tried to sabotage my plane? He blinked. You tell me. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation. I didn't accuse anyone. Yet. Vanessa exhaled, folded her arms. You think I did it? I think someone had access. Someone with clearance I don't have. She studied him. You realize how insane that sounds? Terrence shrugged. Not as insane as ignoring a man who tried to warn you before takeoff. The silence between them crackled. Finally, she said, Why are you still here, Terrence? Most guys in your position would have taken the attention and ran. TV interviews. Podcasts. A lawsuit maybe. I didn't come here to be seen, he said. I came to fix what breaks. And then his phone buzzed. A text from Julian. VXA08 not logged in FAA records. That code shouldn't exist. Be careful. Terrence looked up at Vanessa. Did you approve repair code VXA? She frowned. I've never heard of it. But something in her eyes said otherwise. Because as she turned to leave, she muttered under her breath. Barely audible but enough. Damn it, Preston. Terrence froze. Preston. That was her ex-VP of engineering, fired quietly last month. No public explanation. The question wasn't what he did. The question was, did Vanessa cover it up? The footage wasn't supposed to exist. But somewhere between Vanessa's laughter and Terrence's quiet defiance, one of the junior staffers, a 23-year-old intern named Sasha, had lifted her phone and pressed record. It wasn't planned, just instinct. She said later it felt too wrong not to capture. At the time she hadn't even realized how sharp the contrast was. A billionaire CEO mocking the only black mechanic in the hangar, surrounded by people too scared to blink. She hadn't meant for it to go public. But the next morning, the clip appeared online. First on a private aviation subreddit, then on TikTok, then everywhere. The angle wasn't perfect. Shaky, a bit distant, but clear enough to show the exchange. Vanessa in her designer suit, arms folded, smirking. Terrence in oil-stained coveralls, quiet, composed. Her voice echoed through the speakers. "If you can fix that engine in under a day, I'll marry you." Then laughter. Then silence. It lasted 12 seconds. But that was all it needed. By noon, Marry the Mechanic was trending. Half the internet called it empowering, a working-class black man proving billionaires wrong. The other half called it humiliating, modern-day corporate cruelty, dressed as a joke. And Vanessa Hallberg, who'd spent her career controlling every narrative, woke up to find she was no longer the narrator. The morning sunlight sliced across her penthouse office as she scrolled through headlines flashing on her tablet. Hallberg Aviation CEO caught mocking black employee in viral video. Power dynamics or publicity stunt. Mechanic's quiet confidence captures the internet's heart. Her assistant Callie hovered near the door, wringing her hands. Should we release a statement? Vanessa didn't look up. About what? A joke? Callie hesitated. It's being taken very differently online. They're calling it racist? Vanessa interrupted, her tone crisp. Of course they are. Everything's racist now. Callie swallowed hard. There's a petition trending. Callie, Vanessa said, finally meeting her eyes. In 24 hours, something else will trend. A cat doing backflips, or a celebrity divorce. This will die. But it didn't die. By 4:00 p.m., national news outlets picked it up. Commentators debated whether Vanessa's tone carried racial undertones. Corporate watchdogs questioned Hallberg Aviation's diversity record. Investors began sending concerned inquiries. And Terrence, the quiet man who'd fixed her jet overnight, became the face of something she couldn't control. A viral redemption story. Meanwhile, Terrence had no idea what was happening. He was still in the hangar, inspecting the engine for signs of the unauthorized tampering caught on the security feed. His phone buzzed non-stop, but he ignored it until Logan burst in, phone in hand, eyes wide.
Bro, you seen this?
Terrence frowned. Seen what? Logan turned the screen toward him. There it was. A video. Thousands of comments. Millions of views. He fixed it. She mocked him. Look who's laughing now. This is what microaggressions look like. He didn't even flinch. A king. Terrence felt a strange mix of disbelief and unease. The video was short, stripped of all context. No mention of the engine failure. No sign of the fracture he'd discovered. None of the sabotage beneath the surface. Just a soundbite. A humiliation frozen in pixels. He stared for a long moment, then handed the phone back. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. Yeah, but man, you won, Logan grinned. You're like a hero right now. Terrence shook his head. Heroes get to go home. I still got work to finish. But deep down, a knot of dread tightened in his chest. He knew how fast public favor turned, how praise could sour into pity, or weaponize into something darker. He turned back to the engine, his reflection faint in the polished metal. For the first time, he didn't recognize the man looking back. By the next morning, Vanessa's inbox was a graveyard of panic. Emails from PR firms, sponsors, lawyers, her board, even an old college friend trying to offer damage control advice. The video had crossed 10 million views overnight. Morning talk shows dissected her tone like a courtroom exhibit. One guest said, "If this isn't classism laced with racial superiority, I don't know what is." Vanessa slammed the tablet shut. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd built Hallberg Aviation from a startup in a rented warehouse to a global powerhouse. She employed thousands. She donated millions. But none of that mattered now. The world didn't care about the charity galas or scholarships. It cared about that look, the one where she'd smirked at the man who'd saved her life. Callie stepped in timidly. They're asking for a statement. Something simple, human, empathetic. Vanessa cut her off. No, I'm not apologizing for sarcasm. If people can't take a joke, that's their problem. Ma'am, call legal. Draft a clarification. Say it was playful banter between colleagues. Emphasize workplace camaraderie. Vanessa, do it. The command rang through the glass office, sharp enough to echo. Outside the door, staff exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody said it aloud, but the tension was visible, the kind of tension that told every employee where the line between power and humanity had been drawn. The official statement went live that afternoon. The remarks in question were made in jest and reflect a light-hearted moment between colleagues. Halberg Aviation values diversity, respect, and inclusion at every level. It did not help. Within minutes, hashtags flipped. Not a colleague. Playful banter kills respect. Halberg hypocrisy. Reporters began digging into the company's history. Old employee reviews resurfaced, detailing a culture of elitism. An ex-project manager tweeted, "We used to joke that Halberg valued jet engines more than the people who built them." Then came the memes. Screenshots of Vanessa's smirk next to captions like diversity, but make it performative. The world was laughing again, but not with her. Terrence's sister called that evening. "Baby brother," she said gently, "you're on TV. I know. They're calling you the mechanic who humbled the billionaire." He closed his eyes. "That's not what happened. I know that too. But people need symbols, Terrence. You gave them one." He didn't reply, because he knew she was right. And yet he hated it. He wasn't an activist. He wasn't a symbol. He was just a man who'd done his job, and been mocked for it. Now, every word he said, every silence he held, was being reinterpreted through the lens of a viral narrative he never wrote. Meanwhile, in the penthouse office, Vanessa sat alone. The city glowed beneath her, sharp lines of light cutting through the desert haze. She held a glass of water she didn't drink. Her reflection in the window looked almost unfamiliar. For the first time, she saw herself as others did, poised, detached, unreachable. But she also saw something else. Fear. Not fear of the media. Fear of losing control. Because if this spiraled further, she wouldn't just lose her reputation. She'd lose her company. And the man at the center of it, the man she'd dismissed as invisible, had the power, however unintentionally, to destroy her. At exactly 11:14 p.m., her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You should have handled it privately. Now it's too late." She frowned, reread it, and dialed her head of security. No answer. Then a second message came in. "Check who posted the video first." Her stomach turned. She opened her laptop, traced the post's metadata through Halberg's internal server logs, something she hadn't done in years. And when the origin loaded on the screen, she froze. It hadn't been posted by a random employee. It hadn't been uploaded by a stranger. It came from an IP address registered inside her private office suite. Her own network. Her own floor. Someone. Close. She stared at the monitor, breath catching. Because the account that first leaked the video belonged to a user named P. Halberg, her late father's old login. And that meant only one thing. Someone inside Halberg Aviation had resurrected a ghost, and they wanted her empire to burn. It started with a knock, then another. Then the sound of camera shutters firing through the frosted glass of his apartment lobby in East Las Vegas. Terrence had lived in the same two-bedroom unit for 5 years. Quiet, unbothered, mostly ignored. His neighbors nodded politely. He paid rent early. The super liked him because he fixed his own appliances. No drama, no stories. That morning, he stepped into the hallway with his coffee, and nearly dropped it. 2 local news vans sat across the street. A reporter leaned out of a black SUV, her mic already in hand. Someone had drawn a chalk heart on the sidewalk in front of the entrance, with the word hero in bold red letters. And somehow it felt more terrifying than flattering. His phone buzzed again. 17 new voicemails. 30 unread texts. The words repeated themselves. "Can we get a quote? Do you plan to sue Halberg Aviation? You're trending on Good Morning America. My daughter saw your story and cried. Thank you. You've inspired thousands. You're a disgrace. Stay in your lane. We know where you live." Terrence closed his door. For 8 years, he was invisible. Now the world wouldn't look away. But not because of who he was. Because of what he represented. He stayed home that day. Curtains drawn. TV off. Laptop closed. He couldn't process the noise. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them knew him. The ones praising him made him feel boxed in, like he'd been cast in a role he didn't audition for. The ones attacking him were louder, sharper, digging into his past, his family, his silence. It was only a matter of time before they found what he'd buried. At 2:13 p.m., the email arrived. From a burner account. No name, no subject. Just a single attachment. Clark County Court Records. He clicked it open. And there it was. State of Nevada, Versi Terrence A. Miles. Charge: resisting arrest without violence. Disposition: dismissed. Terrence leaned back, hand pressed to his face. He was 19. He and two friends had been walking home from a basketball game. A patrol car had flashed its lights. An officer jumped out, shouting, hand already on his gun. They'd been told to get on the ground. Terrence hesitated, not because he was defiant, but because he was stunned, confused. He asked, "What did we do?" That question got him cuffed. They kept him in a holding cell for 12 hours. Filed a resisting charge. Dropped it 3 weeks later when the footage came out. But the record never fully disappeared. It lingered faint and haunting, like smoke. And now someone had found it. Someone wanted to use it. At Halberg Aviation's executive board meeting that evening, the mood was surgical. The 10 members sat at a long glass table, overlooking the strip, each with their tablets open, files scrolling by like a conveyor belt of liabilities. Vanessa sat at the head, silent. They didn't mention the video anymore. That was yesterday's storm. Today was about containment. Damage control's no longer a press issue, said Howard Keene, the board's vice chair. It's a stockholder issue. We're losing control of the narrative, another added. This man, this Terrence, he's become the face of something we never agreed to be part of. He's not even on payroll anymore. Someone else chimed in. He hasn't been since the emergency repair was filed as freelance. Vanessa said nothing. Her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of her coffee cup. Howard turned toward her. We found something, he said slowly. Something from his record. A file appeared on the screen behind them. The arrest. The date. The charge. Dismissed. One board member frowned. Howard nodded. Yes. But the point isn't conviction. It's perception. Another leaned forward. This story's already racialized. He's being treated like a martyr. But this, he pointed at the screen. This muddies it. Makes it complex. If we leak this carefully, we reframe the image. Vanessa's voice was low, sharp. You want to smear him? Howard didn't blink. I want to remind the world he's not perfect. He's not our problem, she said. But he is, Howard replied, because you made him the symbol of your mistake. The silence cracked. Everyone turned. I said something stupid, Vanessa admitted. But I won't weaponize a false charge to clean it up. Howard's eyes narrowed. Then someone else will. Terrence met with Julian later that night, in the back booth of a diner off Charleston Boulevard. The place was empty, lights humming, the air heavy with grease and old jukebox songs. Julian slid into the booth, laptop in hand. You're not going to like this, he said. Terrence waited. They're prepping a smear drop. Real subtle. An opinion piece, probably, framed as background context. Your old court case is already in a couple of draft inboxes. Terrence stared at the table. I was 19, he said. I know. I didn't do anything wrong. I know that too. Doesn't matter. A pause. They'll make it about fear, Julian said. You were arrested. You were in a system. That's all they need to question your credibility, not to destroy it, just to muddy it. Terrence looked up. What do I do? Julian exhaled. You can stay quiet and hope it passes. Or you get ahead of it. Say what? That I got arrested for asking a cop a question? Julian leaned forward. You tell the story before they do. Terrence didn't respond, because he wasn't sure he wanted to be a story. Back at Halberg HQ, Vanessa sat alone in the dark, the city's lights blinking beneath her office window. Her screen showed a paused news clip, a panel discussion about racial reckoning in corporate culture. She didn't hear the words anymore. Her eyes were fixed on a paused frame. Terrence mid-sentence, calm, focused, and behind him, the jet she'd once said no one else could touch. A strange thought crept into her mind, one she didn't want to name. What if he was never supposed to be invisible? What if she'd needed someone like him in her empire all along, not as a symbol but as a standard? Then a knock. Callie entered, face tight. You should see this. Vanessa followed her to the screen near the conference room. A video was streaming live. Terrence, in his apartment, Not scripted. No handlers. Just him. Seated by a window. Looking tired but resolute. He was speaking slowly. Clearly. I'm not a hero. I'm a mechanic. I saw something wrong and spoke up. A pause. And yes, when I was 19, I got arrested for asking why I was being stopped. I was scared. I was respectful. I still got cuffed. It was dismissed. But not forgotten. Another pause. I never talked about it because I didn't want to be defined by it. But now that someone's trying to use it against me, I'd rather tell it myself. He looked directly at the camera. My name is Terrence Miles. I fix engines. I speak when I see danger. And I'm not ashamed of surviving a system that wasn't built to protect me. The feed ended. Vanessa stared at the screen. And for the first time since the firestorm began, she felt small. Not because he had turned the tables, but because he had never tried to. He just told the truth. In a private Slack channel at Hallberg Aviation, a quiet message appeared between two usernames tied to the legal team. He went public. We need the next move. The reply came seconds later. Already in play. Vanessa doesn't know yet. What is it? We're reopening the whistleblower case. The one from 2020. And we're attaching his name to it. Terrence didn't go home that night. The hum of generators echoed through the hangar, casting long, jagged shadows against the Falcon 8X's curved body. Outside, the desert heat held on stubbornly, even as the stars shimmered across the inky sky. It was almost midnight. Most of the staff had gone. The fluorescent lights had dimmed. But he stayed, with a broken toolset, no official blueprint, and a deadline that wasn't written on any schedule, but pressed heavy on his chest. The words echoed in his head. Fix this in under a day, and I'll marry you. To them, it had been a joke. A throwaway taunt. A performance in power and class. But to Terrence, it was something else entirely. Not about marriage. Not about proving himself to Vanessa. It was about finally breaking the wall that had kept men like him outside the door, even when they built the very foundation the door stood on. And he knew what they were all waiting for. His failure. That he'd fall short without the specialized Hallberg diagnostic kit they'd forgotten to leave him. That the hangar systems, which mysteriously locked him out of admin-level access, would slow him down. That his hands, black and calloused, would be blamed if anything went wrong, and forgotten if it went right. Terrence pulled out his leather pouch of personal tools. The same ones his father had left him. Half the sockets were rusted. A couple wrenches were warped from years of overuse. The socket drivers squeaked, but they worked. They had always worked. He laid the tools gently next to the engine, then grabbed his notebook and began drawing from memory. No blueprint. Just instinct. Line by line, he mapped the engine's turbine anatomy. Every valve, shaft, and pressure point. Then he annotated the areas that had been tampered with. The fracture in the bracket, the misaligned relay, the redundancy loop that someone had bypassed to avoid triggering a diagnostic alert. It was clear now. Someone inside had covered it up. Maybe not for Vanessa, maybe against her. But that didn't matter in this moment. What mattered was that she had mocked him for noticing what no one else had. And now she and her whole empire were depending on the very man they wouldn't name aloud, at meetings, wouldn't invite to team briefings, wouldn't sit next to in the cafeteria. Terrence cracked his knuckles, adjusted his headlamp, and got to work. The next morning, just after 6:00 a.m., sunlight crept into the hangar like an unwanted visitor. The air smelled of ozone and motor oil. Terrence was still there. Sleeves rolled, hands blackened, sweat dried like salt crust on his brow. The night hadn't been kind. Twice he'd dropped a key bolt. Once, a solder joint snapped, and had to be redone from scratch. And at 3:17 a.m., the backup cooling regulator shorted, setting him back another hour. But he didn't stop. His phone had 14 missed calls. 2 from his sister, checking if he was alive. The rest were unknown numbers. He ignored them all. Then, a voice, casual, sarcastic, broke the quiet. You trying to become part of the engine, or just hugging it for good luck? Terrence turned. Logan, coffee in hand, stood at the entrance with a crooked grin. Terrence didn't answer. Oh, you know she ain't serious, right? Logan added, stepping closer. The whole marriage thing? Just her way of playing. You really gonna kill yourself over that? Terrence kept his eyes on the turbine coil he'd just finished aligning. This isn't about her. Coulda fooled me. I'm doing this because it needs to be done right. Not patched. Not faked. Not covered up. Logan shrugged. Suit yourself. Management says we need it back in the air by noon. Her investors flying in from Germany. Terrence paused. Noon? This wasn't just a vanity fix anymore. The engine had to work. And if it didn't, the person blamed would be obvious. Still kneeling, he said. Then they shouldn't have waited until it broke. Logan stared for a second, then laughed quietly, walking away. Man, good luck. By 7:45 a.m., more staff filtered in. The floor buzzed. Techs moved crates. Engineers unlocked laptops. A manager barked orders about clearing the press from the outer gate. Apparently the emergency landing had leaked. And Vanessa, as always, was nowhere to be seen. But her name was everywhere. Ms. Hallberg needs that jet airborne. Ms. Hallberg said not to involve legal yet. Ms. Hallberg already approved the PR draft. Terrence tuned it out. He tightened the last bolt on the engine's rotation housing and lowered his socket wrench. His shoulders ached. But the hum of the engine, clean, consistent, unbroken, was like hearing a heartbeat return. He wiped his hands, stepped back, and nodded. Done. No crew, no press, no one else in the circle. Just him. And the hum. Then he turned toward the computer system, still locked out of diagnostic software, and ran a test cycle manually, a process no one at Hellberg had done in years. One by one, each function passed.
Turbine acceleration.
Fuel compression. Thermal regulation. Stabilizer sync. Okay. No overload. No alarms. No skips. The engine was perfect. Hey. The voice was different this time. Calmer. Clear. He looked up. Vanessa Hallberg stood across from him, still in her power suit, this time without the sunglasses. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept either. He said nothing. She walked around the plane slowly, then toward him. No entourage this time. Just her. And silent. Finally, she said, "Is it fixed?" Terrence simply nodded. "And is it safe?" He met her gaze. "If it fails now, it won't be because I missed something." She studied him for a moment, as if searching for weakness. "You didn't use the internal diagnostics," she said. "They blocked my login." Her expression didn't change. But something in her eyes shifted. "You did all this by hand?" she asked. "I did what I've always done. With what I've always had." For a long beat, Vanessa said nothing. Then, and it shocked even her, she said softly, "Thank you." Terrence didn't flinch. "You said I'd marry you if I fixed it." A beat passed. More crew members nearby paused. Even Logan froze. Vanessa gave a half smile, unsure whether to laugh or shut down. "You're really calling that bluff?" "I'm calling the disrespect." The smile vanished, and the hangar, for the first time in months, fell into a full, uncomfortable silence. "Is that what this is about?" she said slowly. "You feel disrespected?" He took one step closer, engine purring behind him. "I don't need you to marry me. I need you to admit what I already proved, that I matter. Not because of what you think I look like. Not because of some challenge, but because you bet against the one man who didn't ask for your permission to be excellent." Her face hardened. The same expression she used when firing executives. Calculating. Cold. But then, something unexpected. She nodded. Just once. Then, walked away. No apology. No media statement. No retraction. But that nod, that was the first time in 8 years she'd acknowledged him as real. As visible. As worthy. And yet Terrence felt no peace. Because just as he reached for his phone to update Julian on the finished engine, a new alert popped up. Security cam footage. On a Twice-side access. Last night, 11. He tapped into the feed. It showed the hangar door opening from the inside. A figure entering. Not him. Not Vanessa. Someone else. Someone who'd tampered with the engine after he started working on it. And as Terrence zoomed in on the footage, the face that appeared on the grainy screen made his stomach twist, because it wasn't a stranger. It was someone from her team. Someone with keys. And clearance. And a reason to keep the truth buried. They called the press conference to turn the page. That's what Vanessa told her team. This wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about realignment, recentering the brand around transparency, performance, and progress. But what she didn't say, not to her PR team, not to the board, not even to herself, was that the viral attention had cracked something deeper. Control. Authority. The ability to walk into a room and own the narrative before it began. Now she was walking into a room where half the people didn't believe she deserved to be leading the narrative at all. The cameras were already rolling. As she took the stage, reporters packed the floor, lights flashed. Her legal team sat in the front row, flanked by her assistant and two silent executives. And somewhere off stage, Terrence Miles stood behind a black curtain, invited only an hour earlier at her request. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a performance. Vanessa approached the podium, adjusted the mic, and gave her signature tight smile. "We appreciate everyone being here today," she began, voice calm and practiced. "Over the past week, Halberg Aviation has faced an unexpected level of scrutiny, not for technical failures, not for strategic missteps, but for a viral moment that has unfortunately been taken out of context." There was movement in the back of the room. Reporters shifted, pens readied. "I want to be clear," she continued. "My remark toward Mr. Miles was intended as levity, nothing more. In high-pressure environments, we sometimes rely on humor to cut through tension. That's what it was. A joke. No apology. Just framing. A joke." But it was the next part that made the room stiffen. "I've since learned more about Mr. Miles's background," she added, her tone casually dismissive. "And while his mechanical instincts are clearly impressive, I believe companies like ours must also be mindful of proper certifications, documentation, and frankly citizenship validation." For a full 3 seconds, no one spoke. Then the buzz began. Low murmurs, followed by the audible snapping of phone cameras, the sharp gasps from two black journalists seated near the side aisle. Terrence, behind the curtain, didn't move. She just questioned whether he belonged in the country. No mention of his FAA license. No mention of his years at the company. Just one word: papers, that reached back generations, coded and cruel. And she'd said it like it was a passing note. Like it didn't carry centuries of weight. A question meant to humiliate, to delegitimize, to stain without proof. And Terrence felt the heat rise in his ears. He'd survived racist code switching all his life, in job interviews, in hospital waiting rooms, in airports and hardware stores. He knew how to mask, how to make people comfortable, how to tuck himself in. But this wasn't misinterpretation. It was deliberate. That night, the video spread faster than wildfire. "Do you even have papers?" became the quote plastered across every headline, meme, and TikTok duet. Commentators debated whether Vanessa had gone too far. Others claimed it was a valid corporate concern. But within hours, Black Twitter had already broken it down. When they can't beat your talent, they question your blood. For Terrence, the sting wasn't in the racism itself. That part was predictable. It was in the audacity. The willingness to erase his whole existence, his whole lineage, with a single veiled implication. He spent the evening alone on his back porch, hands in his lap, watching the sun fall behind the Las Vegas skyline. He hadn't returned any calls. Not Julian's. Not his sister's. Not the 3 news producers begging for interviews. He just sat there thinking about his father, about the way James Miles Sr. used to walk into that tiny garage with his name hand-painted on the door, about how he'd taught Terrence the worth of sweat, the integrity of tools, the truth that when your hands build something right, no one can take that from you. But they were trying. Not to take the engine. To take him, his identity, his dignity, his right to belong. And something inside Terrence snapped. Not with rage. With purpose. The next morning, his sister pulled into his driveway at 6:40 a.m., mouth open, phone already in hand. "You really did this." He opened the garage door slowly. Inside, bathed in pale desert light, was a half-finished engine block. Something she didn't recognize. "What is that?" "A prototype," Terrence said. "Been working on it for 2 years. Quietly." She blinked. "Since when?" "Since I realized I'd never get promoted without going around the system." He moved past her and placed a folded blueprint on the table. His fingers trembled slightly. Not from nerves, but from the weight of what he was about to do. "You going public?" "Not yet. I'm going competitive." His sister frowned. "Against who?" He turned, eyes steady. Her. At 9:00 a.m. The entire Halberg Aviation building buzzed with confusion. An invitation had appeared in every inbox, from Terrence Miles. The subject line was simple. "You questioned my belonging. Let's test your engineering." Attached was a live stream link. A challenge, set for noon. The message read, "Since Halberg Aviation believes I am unqualified to contribute, I will be presenting a clean engine propulsion prototype of my own design, built without access to proprietary software, tools, or Halberg IP. I challenge Vanessa Halberg and her engineering team to do the same, in the same time frame, under the same constraints. You want papers? I'll show you performance." And this time the world will watch the full video. Social media erupted. The hashtags returned. Sharper now. Prove it, Vanessa. Challenge accepted, Terrence. No papers, just proof. News anchors scrambled to cover the announcement. Engineering blogs picked up the prototype claim, debating whether a solo mechanic could really out-engineer a Fortune 100 team. But none of that mattered. Because for the first time, Terrence had set the terms, and Vanessa, she'd been baited. Inside her executive suite, Vanessa stared at the screen in disbelief. He can't be serious, she muttered. Howard, seated nearby, read the invite aloud again. It's performance-based, not legal. You can decline. If I decline, I confirm everything he said, Vanessa snapped. Her assistant hovered nervously. Should we alert PR? No, she said flatly. Alert the lab. We're building something by noon. Howard raised an eyebrow. Under these constraints, no software, no IP. She stood. I built this company from nothing. I can build a model engine in 4 hours. You're not a technician anymore, she glared. Then maybe it's time I remind them who I was before I became a headline. But as she stormed out of the room, she missed the blinking notification on her desk tablet. An anonymous tip. A forwarded server log. Someone had been watching her private meetings. And they'd just leaked something bigger than a joke. Because while Vanessa prepared to meet Terrence's public challenge, someone on her own board had quietly sent Terrence a sealed document. Confidential internal investigation. Halberg Aviation codename, Whistledust. Attached was a list of employees who had reported discrimination, all quietly silenced. And at the very top of that list, the name T. Miles, redacted, but still visible under a half-erased timestamp. Terrence didn't need her stage anymore. The world had already seen what she tried to hide. The smirk, the comment, the attempt to diminish his presence. But Terrence understood something. Vanessa still didn't. The fight for dignity wasn't one in front of cameras or behind microphones. It was one in places no one else wanted to go. So he didn't countersue, didn't issue another press release, didn't accept the interview offers, or the brand deals or the speaking tour circuit that every viral underdog is supposed to take after a public slap from power. Instead, he asked himself a quieter question. What had she given up on that still mattered? And when he started digging, the answer found him fast. Project Eden Wing. Buried deep inside Halberg Aviation's research archive. Flagged in red, marked discontinued. A vertical lift propulsion system that once promised to revolutionize fuel efficiency for urban aircraft. Scrapped after a failed test flight, and 2 years of internal delays. Terrence remembered it. Barely. It had been announced with fanfare. White papers. A keynote at an international aerospace expo. Then, silence. No layoffs. No public cancellation, just disappearance. And in its place, rumors that the core design was unstable, that Halberg's team had rushed development, that it was an embarrassment Vanessa didn't want associated with her name. But Terrence saw something else when he looked at the old schematics. Promise. Not perfection, but potential. The kind engineers dream of. A half-formed idea that had been choked by ego and buried under red tape. So he made a decision. While Vanessa flexed her dominance in press rooms and board meetings, Terrence would quietly do what she couldn't. Build what she said was unfixable. He worked out of a borrowed garage in North Las Vegas. It wasn't much. Cracked concrete floors, flickering lights, no AC, but it was enough. Every day for 30 days, Terrence rose at 5:00 a.m. and worked past midnight. His hands bled again. His back stiffened. He sold his truck to cover parts. Crowdfunded just enough for a cooling chamber. Every penny went back into the frame. Julian helped with the electronics. His sister handled permits. An old friend from trade school shipped in retired turbine components. But the core engine, the soul of Edenwing, was Terrence's alone. He stripped her flawed version down to its bones, removed the redundant sensors, rewired the regulators, rebalanced the weight ratio. He didn't cut corners. He cut excuses. Vanessa had failed not because it was impossible, but because she'd tried to build it through committee, with people who feared her more than they believed in the tech. Terrence built it with truth, with stubbornness, with the kind of hunger no board meeting could recognize. By day 27, word had spread, not publicly, not on social media, but in whispers among former Halberg engineers, startup forums, aerospace nerds who caught wind of something impossible happening in a desert garage. A few showed up uninvited, brought tools, stayed, helped, not because they wanted fame, Because they were tired of being told innovation only lived inside the walls of billion-dollar buildings. One of them, a former Halberg design analyst named Ruby, said it best on day 29. "You're building what we all wanted to believe in, Terrence." And she gave up because the first test didn't go viral. You didn't. That's the difference. On day 30, under the desert sun, Terrence rolled the prototype out onto the makeshift test pad, a flat strip of reclaimed tarmac near an abandoned airfield. The engine stood 6 feet tall, silver and black, with a carbon composite chassis and a dual-rotor hover stabilizer. The initials TM1 were stenciled near the cooling intake, not out of vanity, but to mark what had never existed before. 31 people stood around the perimeter. Engineers, mechanics, former interns, people who once walked Halberg's hallways and knew what it felt like to be passed over, muted, edited out of credits. And across the field, half hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, an attention jaw, stood Vanessa. No cameras, no entourage. She'd come alone, not to cheer, not to sabotage, just to see what he'd done without her. Terrence stepped up to the control console, took a breath, and activated the sequence. The engine powered up, soft at first, a hum, rising slowly. Then came the whine. The chamber flickered blue. The twin rotors spun, faster, then faster still, until the frame lifted 6 inches off the ground. Stable. Smooth. No tilt. No shake.
3 minutes.
5, 10. At 12 minutes the test completed. No overheating. No structural failure. Every metric passed. Better performance than Halberg's version. Lower emissions. Higher lift-to-weight ratio. The crowd erupted into stunned silence. Then applause. Vanessa didn't clap. She just stared. Arms crossed. Jaw clenched. Lips pursed so tightly it looked like she might crack her own teeth. Terrence didn't look at her. He looked at the engine. At what he'd made from scraps, faith, and spite. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not because he'd won, because he'd proven that being dismissed wasn't a death sentence. It was fuel. Later that night, Terrence sat at the edge of the tarmac, watching the test footage loop on a cracked monitor. Ruby walked over, handed him a cold soda, and said, "You know what's gonna happen now, right?" He didn't look up. "She'll either try to buy it, or kill it." He nodded. "She's already drafting her move," Ruby added. "How do you know?" She handed him her phone. On the screen, a leaked memo, anonymous from Halberg's internal Slack channel. Ray TM1 engine. No public acknowledgement. Prepare patent review. Legal exploring prior claim from Eden Wing archive. Terrence leaned back. "They're gonna say I stole it." Ruby nodded. "Unless you beat them to the patent office. I can't afford it." She smiled. "You can now." She handed him a check. Terrence's eyes widened. "Where did this come from?" She grinned. "You didn't see the crowdfunding page?" He hadn't. She showed him. $312,004 raised in 48 hours. Donors from 19 countries. Engineers, students, activists, mechanics, all backing one message. Build the future they said you weren't allowed to. But as Terrence stared at the check, his phone buzzed again. A new message. Unlisted number. No text. Just a file attachment labeled Halberg Internal Com. Redacted. He opened it, and what he saw made his chest tighten. Because it wasn't just about Eden Wing. It was an email chain dated 2 weeks before the viral video. Subject line: "Terminate T-miles. Keep off paperwork." And Vanessa's name was CC'd. The boardroom was colder than usual. It wasn't just the temperature though, someone had definitely cranked the AC. It was the atmosphere. Thick with calculation. Laced with tension. Vanessa Halberg sat at the head of the table in a navy suit sharp enough to slice steel, flanked by her most trusted legal advisor, and the COO, Martin Doyle. Around her were 10 board members. All quiet, all watching. Her finger tapped the glass table slowly, waiting for the murmurs to stop. When they did, she spoke with deliberate clarity. "This ends now." No one moved. She leaned forward, hands clasped. "Terrence Miles has made it clear that he intends to use this moment to undermine our leadership. He's politicized a joke, weaponized a prototype, and now he's being treated like he built this company himself." Still. Silence. "I want a full legal review. We freeze all pending collaborations. No licensing. No joint ventures. And I want a public clarification from our investor relations team. We are not affiliated with the TM1 engine." That's when the COO, Martin, cleared his throat. Vanessa, he said carefully. We've seen the numbers. She blinked. What numbers? He turned his tablet toward the screen behind her. A chart appeared. Sleek and brutal. Social sentiment analysis. Terrence Miles. Engagement up 4. Public trust index. Engineering community support. 92. And this, he added, is the pre-sale reservation count from potential aerospace buyers on the waiting list for TM1, even though it doesn't have formal FAA certification yet. Another chart loaded. Private interest projections, 41 million in unsolicited offers. Investor interest, 3 competing firms. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. People believe in him, Martin said. More importantly, they believe in what you dismissed. One of the older board members, a woman named Sylvia who rarely spoke, added softly, you tried to bury him, and instead you planted a symbol. Vanessa sat back slowly, her mind racing. They weren't here to support her. They were here to weigh her. After the meeting, she stormed into her office, slamming the door behind her. Callie followed cautiously. They're flipping, Vanessa said through clenched teeth, off one engine in a sympathy tour. Kelly didn't answer. I built this company, with nothing, from scratch, and now they want to sell me out for PR likes and tech fairy dust. Callie hesitated, then asked, what if it's not just about PR? Vanessa turned sharply. What if, Callie continued, they're not trying to replace you, just correct you? Vanessa scoffed. This isn't a correction, it's a coup. No ma'am, Callie said quietly. It's a consequence. The words hit like a slap. Vanessa said nothing as Callie backed out of the room, the door clicking softly behind her. Meanwhile, across town, Terrence stared at the leaked email chain, still glowing on his phone screen. Terminate T Miles. Keep off paperwork. It wasn't just betrayal. It was deliberate erasure. He'd been marked for silent removal, weeks before the video, before the engine, before the world knew his name. Julian sat across from him in their borrowed office, arms crossed. You sure you want to go public with that? I don't want revenge, Terrence replied. I want to end the pattern. Julian leaned forward. Then you better brace yourself. Because once you leak this, it won't be about an engine anymore. It'll be about every black employee, whoever got shown the door quietly. And they'll make sure you don't walk through another one. Terrence nodded. He understood the stakes. But the decision had already been made. The next morning, the email went live, anonymously leaked to a trusted journalist known for corporate exposés. Within hours, the story broke across every major platform. Vanessa Hallberg signed off on silent firing, then called it a joke. Black engineer was marked for termination before going viral. Records reveal. New leak confirms retaliation attempt against whistleblower. And just like that, Terrence's story stopped being personal. It became institutional. News outlets began digging deeper into Hallberg's HR files. Former employees came forward. Some confirmed similar treatment, quiet removals, blocked promotions, suspicious reassignments. A name appeared again and again. Preston Krall, the former VP of engineering. The same one Vanessa had muttered about weeks earlier. One story, then 10, then 50. By noon, Hallberg pattern was trending globally. And for the first time, Vanessa Hallberg's name was trending with disgust, not respect. Inside the Hallberg executive tower, panic replaced precision. Investors called emergency meetings. HR was placed under external audit. Vanessa's legal counsel recommended temporary recusal from public-facing roles. But she wasn't going quietly. At a hastily assembled internal Q&A streamed to employees, she stepped on stage in a cream blazer, jaw set, voice shaking with carefully bottled fury. Let me be very clear, she said. The decision to part ways with Mr. Miles was never finalized. Internal conversations are common in companies of our size and do not reflect discrimination. They reflect strategic alignment. But as she spoke, her eyes darted across the crowd, cold, calculating. And then she saw it. The thing she feared more than legal consequences. Doubt. Real, visible, unconcealed doubt in the eyes of her staff. Later that day, one of Hallberg's biggest private investors, a man named Leonard Brooks, requested a one-on-one meeting with Vanessa. She agreed, assuming it was a show of support. Instead, it was something else entirely. He met her in the private lounge above the executive floor, where expensive whiskeys lined the wall and sunlight touched the floor like gold. He poured himself a drink, sat crossed his legs. You know, he began, when I first backed you, Vanessa, I told my partners you were the future, visionary. Ruthless, yes, but visionary. She folded her arms. And now, he said quietly, I wonder if you're just another executive trying to punish someone who didn't stay in their lane. Her jaw tightened. That man is taking credit for a prototype built off my company's failed research. He took a sip. Funny. Edison said that about Tesla too. Her breath caught. Then Leonard leaned in, face expressionless. We're not going to bury him. We're going to bet on him. She stared at him, speechless. You'll step back, he continued. Temporarily. No press, no statements. Let the market breathe. Or you'll lose the board. And me. She stood. You think I'm afraid of a few investors? He stood too. And then with a smile so calm it sliced clean through her ego, he said the 6 words that made her blood run cold. He has something you never did. A pause. The people. And as Vanessa stared at the door after he left, Callie re-entered the room, holding a package. No return address, she said, confused. It's just this. She handed it to Vanessa. Inside was a printed photo. A black and white snapshot of Terrence's prototype. And scribbled on the back, in marker, was a single line. What you threw away is taking flight. Terrence had never wanted to be famous, but fame didn't ask permission. It simply cracked open your life, pulled out everything private, and dared you to survive the exposure. Within 3 days of the prototype's test going viral, Terrence's name wasn't just trending. It had become a dividing line. Cable news shows debated him hourly. Visionary or opportunist? Engineer versus executive? What this says about race, class, and tech. Did Vanessa Hallberg actually mean it as a joke? Every host had an angle. On one channel, he was a genius, a self-made black innovator reclaiming power from a corporate giant. On another, he was a problem, an ungrateful employee weaponizing victimhood for fame. He didn't watch any of it, but the world did. And America, true to form, chose sides. Online his name became #fuel. Build with Terrence trended next to Miles Ahead and Boycottelberg. But so did the other side. Fraud mechanic. Unlicensed liar. Gratitude goes both ways. People who'd never built a thing in their lives suddenly had strong opinions about engine design and patent law. Anonymous accounts flooded his inbox with questions. Where were you really born? How'd you get those parts without stealing? How do we know you didn't sabotage Hallberg's jet on purpose to make yourself look good? And then the threats started. Emails. DMs. Voicemails. Postcards with cutout letters. One read simply, "You don't belong in this country. Prototypes can't save you from bullets." Another said, "Keep talking, and we'll bury you in the same garage you built that engine in." Terrence sat in his living room one evening, sifting through a stack of envelopes Julian had intercepted before they hit his mailbox. Jesus, Julian muttered, flipping one open with gloves. This one has powder. Could be nothing, but I'm calling it in. Terrence nodded silently. His eyes weren't on the threats anymore. They were on the photo Vanessa had received, the one Ruby had secretly snapped of his engine test, with the words scribbled on the back. What you threw away is taking flight. He recognized Ruby's handwriting immediately, and what chilled him more than the threats was the growing feeling that this had stopped being about him. The next morning, his sister banged on his door before sunrise. "You need to see this," she said, barging in with her phone. A blog had just published a piece titled, "The Engineer Who Faked His Way to Fame." It featured a distorted photo of Terrence in high school, surrounded by cherry-picked records and quotes from unnamed sources, questioning his certifications, his arrest history, and whether someone else might have built the prototype for him. "I knew it," his sister whispered. "I knew they'd try to flip the story." Terrence took the phone, scrolled. His name was laced with doubt. His intelligence turned into a question mark. His credibility wrapped in racist suspicion. Julian called 2 minutes later. "They're setting you up, T. This isn't just backlash. It's coordinated." "By who?" "Hallberg's legal firm has a reputation," Julian said. "They do quiet takedowns. Reputation warfare. Third-party narratives, they call it. But this is beyond PR. Someone wants to break you before you can license your engine." "Why?" "Because if you succeed," Julian said, "you don't just win, you redefine what leadership looks like." A beat pat. Then Julian added, "Check your email. I'm forwarding a tip that just came in. No name. But you need to read it." Terrence opened the email later that night. No subject. No signature. Just a single sentence. "You're being set up." And below that, a forwarded file. Hallberg Engineering Lab. Incident Review Logs. 20. He opened the attachment. It was a report from 4 months ago, predating the viral video, predating the engine incident, detailing internal concerns about unauthorized override code appearing in multiple propulsion tests. The final paragraph was highlighted. Recommendation: investigate chain of command for potential tampering. Initial suspicion falls on senior engineer teams and leadership office sign-offs. Attached to the report were 2 digital signatures: P. Kroll, V. Hallberg. Terrence leaned back, stunned. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was buried misconduct. And he had just been used as a scapegoat to cover up someone else's intentional sabotage.
At Hallberg headquarters, the chaos only deepened.
Anonymous sources leaked another memo. This one showing that Vanessa had pushed aggressively to expunge whistleblower records attached to the failed Edenwing prototype test. She denied knowledge in public. But behind closed doors, her board didn't believe her anymore. They scheduled a vote of confidence, and she knew what that meant. "You're not cutting me out," she hissed at Martin, the COO. He looked exhausted. "Vanessa, you need to understand. It's not personal. It's always personal when power's on the table." He sighed. "Look around. The country's watching, the market's spooked, and your fight with Terrence just turned into a full-blown ethics scandal." She didn't reply, because she wasn't thinking about ethics. She was thinking about the forwarded file he'd no doubt seen by now, the one that traced back to her oversight. And for the first time in her life, Vanessa Hallberg didn't have a plan. That night, Terrence sat in his garage, eyes closed, listening to the hum of the TM1 engine in test mode. Ruby walked in quietly, holding a tablet. "They just posted a new thread about you." He opened his eyes. "Good or bad?" "Both," she said. "Same split. Same hate. But now, they're questioning her more than you." He took the tablet and read the top comment. "Even if she's telling the truth, the way she handled him screams every bad experience I've had in corporate America. They never see us until we're useful. And when we are, they try to erase us again." He closed the tablet, and for the first time he allowed himself to admit it. This wasn't about building engines anymore. This was about who was allowed to lead, and who was still forced to prove they belonged. At 2:11 a.m., his phone buzzed again. A second email from the same unlisted source. This time, the subject line read, "Incoming move, watch the timing." He clicked it. Inside, a line of code. Encrypted. Traced back to Hallberg Aviation's internal security division. And a short note beneath. "They're planning to claim you breached their servers to steal Edenwing specs. Check your device logs before morning." Terrence stared at the screen, his heart suddenly pounding. They weren't just trying to bury him in rumors anymore. They were about to accuse him of corporate theft. And at that same moment, across town, a sealed affidavit was being quietly delivered to the Nevada Attorney General's office, filed under the title, "Whistleblower Addendum. Internal Sabotage, Retaliation and Racial Targeting. CT Mile." Signed not by Terrence, but by someone inside Hallberg Aviation. It happened just before dawn. A Hallberg Jetstream 9X, one of the company's new demo models, stalled mid-taxi on a Nevada runway. Emergency systems triggered. Smoke vented from the left engine. No passengers were harmed. No crash. But the delay made headlines within minutes. Not because of the stall, but because of the name attached to the report, Terrence Miles. By 7:42 a.m., 2 tech blogs had already posted internal security footage, showing Terrence walking near the Jetstream's maintenance bay 48 hours prior. A sharply edited clip, slowed for effect, showed him crouching by the engine for less than 10 seconds. No tools, no context, no sound. The implication was instant. Sabotage. Hallberg's PR team wasted no time. By noon, a press statement hit every major outlet. "In light of the recent engine failure, Hallberg Aviation is cooperating fully with investigators. We take all internal threats seriously and have turned over all available footage. As this matter is ongoing, we will refrain from further comment." Vanessa didn't need to name him. She didn't have to. The machine was already in motion. Terrence sat at the edge of his garage, laptop open, phone buzzing non-stop. Julian paced behind him. Ruby leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, eyes wide. "Say something," she said. Terrence stared at the footage, paused, rewound, watched again. It was almost cinematic in how precise it looked, as if filmed by someone trying to stage a moment, not document one. Julian leaned over. "You were never even on that maintenance team." Terrence nodded. "I know," Ruby added. "You didn't even touch the engine." "I know." Julian looked down at his phone. Your name's already trending again, but this time it's not love. Half the comments are calling you a bitter ex-employee out for revenge. Terrence didn't move. Then he said quietly, someone set this up weeks ago. This footage, this angle, this timing. It was waiting. Ruby frowned. You think they had this in their back pocket? I think they were waiting for a distraction. Or a fall guy. Back at Halberg HQ, Vanessa stood in her office, overlooking the strip. Her arms crossed tight as she reviewed a second-by-second breakdown of the security clip. Loop it again, she told her security lead. The footage played. There he was. Terrence walking casually past the bay, then crouching, then walking off screen. Her lawyer stepped in. We should be cautious how we frame this publicly. Vanessa didn't turn. He's already framed himself. We have no hard proof. We have enough to ruin his momentum. Her assistant, Callie, hovered behind them. He could sue, she said. If this isn't real. Vanessa turned sharply. I gave that man a stage. He turned it into a courtroom. Now he gets the verdict. Callie didn't reply, but her face, taut, unreadable, said everything. Meanwhile, Julian scrolled through Terrence's home security server logs and suddenly froze. Wait, he said. Do you remember last month when your system glitched? Terrence nodded. Power surge knocked out the external feed. Why? Julian leaned in. You switched to the backup, right? Yeah. Analog loop hidden feed. Separate power bank. Julian turned to Ruby, eyes wide. Please tell me that feed was running when he walked past the jet stream. Terrence clicked open the old interface. Ancient tech, grainy, but clean. He fast-forwarded to the timestamp in question. There it was. The same moment. Different angle. This time, the view showed the full scene. Terrence walking. Pausing not at the engine, but to check his phone. No contact with the aircraft. No entry. No tools. No touch. Just him standing. And in the corner of the frame, blurred but visible, was another figure slipping around the back of the hangar. Someone who did approach the bay. Someone with a lanyard and badge. Someone Halberg's clip had cut out entirely. Terrence exhaled. There it is. Ruby stared. They edited you in, Julian added, and edited him out. The team uploaded the footage to a secure drive and prepared a time-stamped comparison, original versus backup. They layered in logs from the Jetstream maintenance system, showing no record of Terrence's clearance on that engine. And then, at 3:12 p.m., they dropped it online. No commentary. No drama. Just the footage. The truth. It took only an hour. The shift was instant. Journalists who'd been circling Terrence like vultures suddenly pivoted, calling the Halberg footage selectively edited and deliberately misleading. Tech forums erupted in outrage. Aerospace watchdogs launched calls for a federal investigation. Even former Halberg employees began posting their own clips of surveillance being manipulated or lost after incidents. Then came the twist no one saw coming. A whistleblower, an anonymous figure posted to a verified TechLeaks channel under the alias Gateswitch, with proof that Halberg's internal security team had been instructed to pre-label Terrence as a risk vector weeks before the Jetstream stall. That label gave them justification to flag any footage of him, real or not. Attached to the post was a memo. Subject line, containment narrative, T-miles, worst case prep. Vanessa's name was CC'd. Inside Halberg headquarters, all hell broke loose. The board demanded an emergency review. Legal counsel recommended a total freeze on public statements. Vanessa, for the first time in her career, was not allowed to attend her own meeting. Alone in her office, she stared at the looping footage on her tablet. The original, the backup. Two versions of the same moment. Two narratives. And she realized too late that she had bet her company on a lie. Terrence didn't celebrate. When the whistleblower video hit 20 million views, he simply closed his laptop and stepped outside into the cooling desert air. Julian stood beside him. You just cleared your name. Terrence shook his head. No, I proved theirs was fake. That's not the same thing. Ruby joined them. They're turning on her. Fast. He nodded. That's not victory either. Julian exhaled. So what is? Terrence looked at the stars. Building something they can't erase. Just then, his phone buzzed again. This time, not a tip. A voicemail. No number. Digitally scrambled. He pressed play. A slow, static-laced voice spoke just 7 words. Check the patent. They already filed it. The truth wasn't dramatic. The headlines no longer carried her name with reverence. Now Vanessa Hallberg's face sat between words like sabotage, lawsuit, resignation, and racial retaliation. The veneer had cracked. The empire was hemorrhaging. Hallberg Aviation faced 4 federal investigations: securities fraud, internal sabotage, corporate defamation, and whistleblower retaliation. Major contractors pulled back. Shareholders called emergency votes. International clients, once her leverage, issued formal boycotts until executive accountability was addressed. And still Vanessa did not flinch. She wore her silence like armor. Sharp suits, tighter smiles, eyes cold enough to turn breath into vapor. Inside the boardroom, she stood before the remaining executives, expression controlled, voice like steel sharpened by denial. "I will not be apologizing." No one interrupted her. "I won't validate a false narrative designed to paint me as a villain for enforcing standards." Martin Doyle, the COO, stared at the table, fingers interlocked. "Terrence Miles," she continued, "is a skilled mechanic. I never said otherwise. But what he's done here with the public, with the press, with his selective leaks, is emotional exploitation disguised as justice. He has weaponized sympathy." That sentence hung in the air, thick and accusatory. One board member shifted in her chair. Another sipped his water slowly, deliberately. Martin finally spoke. "Vanessa, you're losing the room." She turned toward him, jaw tight. "Then they were never with me." Outside, protesters had gathered for the 3rd straight day. They didn't chant violently. They didn't block entrances. They simply held signs that sliced deeper than megaphones ever could. "Listen when we speak. Apologize. Don't reframe." Built it mocked him. Tried to bury him. "We're not engine parts." Terrence never appeared at the protests. He never endorsed them. Never tweeted support. But the protesters didn't need his presence. He had become a symbol without asking. And Vanessa had become one without noticing. Callie approached her desk in the executive suite, visibly nervous. "New email from HR," she said. "We've had 19 internal resignations this week." Vanessa didn't look up. "Let them go." "And we've received an email from the FAA. They've fast-tracked approval for TM1 under the Clean Lift Initiative. It'll go public tomorrow." Still nothing. Callie hesitated, then bracing herself added, "He's being invited to keynote the Global Urban Aviation Conference next month. Your old slot." Vanessa's fingers twitched, but she remained silent. Later that afternoon, Martin Doyle requested a closed-door meeting. It wasn't unusual. He'd been with her since year 3 of the company's formation, her right hand in most mergers, her executor for every acquisition. He was quiet in public, firm in private, and loyal. Until now. "Vanessa," he said, voice low, "the board is preparing a motion to remove you." She didn't blink. "I tried to buy you time," he continued. "But they're not waiting for another headline. They want separation. Now." "Separation from what?" she asked. "From a woman who built this company from scratch? Or from the uncomfortable optics of what that company turned into under pressure? They're scared of collapse. They're cowards. They're capitalists." She turned to the window, arms folded. "Do you believe I sabotaged that jet?" "No," Martin replied without hesitation. "Do you believe I told Ethan to frame Terrence?" A beat. "No," he said again. "But you let the story fester. You left space for doubt. And you used it." Vanessa turned back to him. "You think I should have apologized? I think you should have remembered he had nothing to lose, and you had everything to protect." He let that sit. "Then, and now, they want a statement of accountability signed, or they'll vote to remove you by end of week." She crossed the room slowly, poured herself a glass of water, and took a long sip. "No," she said softly. "If I go down, I'm not signing anything. They want me gone, fine. But they'll do it publicly. They'll own that decision. I won't die quietly to make them feel better." Martin studied her. Then, almost with sadness, he said, "That's your pride talking, not your legacy." Back in the garage, Terrence and Ruby watched the TM1 test again, now verified by 2 external firms. The engine was certified for demo flight. Orders were starting to line up. A manufacturing partnership had been offered, anonymously. Julian paced nearby. "We traced the patent filings," he said. "The Delaware Shell Corporation? Dead end. But guess who's listed as a silent consultant?" "Vanessa?" Ruby guessed. Julian nodded. "Can't prove her role directly, but someone used her former firm to try and register a near-exact copy of your design." Terrence leaned forward. "Then we beat them to it." You did, Julian said. But the real win was the shift. You're not the guy she mocked anymore. You're the guy who moved past it. Ruby added. People want to work with you now. Not because you clapped back, but because you built something after being clapped at. Terrence didn't smile. But he nodded. Because it was true. That night Vanessa attended what would become her final executive dinner as acting CEO. The room was cold, full of waiting eyes, and subtle glances. The kind of night where alliances end, not with shouts, but with pauses. Martin stood to speak. Before we proceed, he said calmly, I want to introduce someone we've invited to join us this evening. Not as an employee, not as a legal witness, but as a builder. Gasps broke the stillness as the door opened. And in walked Terrence. Vanessa's hand gripped the edge of the table. Her face remained stone. He walked slowly, respectfully. Not arrogant, not performative. Just present. He looked at her. Then at the rest of them. I was asked here, he said, because someone in this room believes you can build a bridge after burning it. The room held its breath. Martin spoke again. I asked him, not to antagonize, but because I'm tired of companies pretending we don't need the people we ignore. He turned to Vanessa, and because leadership is not just about who wins, but about who listens after losing. Vanessa said nothing, but her face was flushed now. Her lip tight. Terrence continued, I'm not here to take over anything. I'm not here to shame anyone. But I am here to say your company can survive this. Not by pretending this didn't happen, but by admitting it did, fully. He set a document on the table. My terms for joint licensing of TM1, with Halberg Aviation. You can use it, manufacture it, share profits. Everyone looked up. In return, he added, I want a foundation built in Halberg's name, to fund and mentor underrepresented engineers who never even get invited into rooms like this. He turned to Vanessa. Your name can mean more than this moment. If you let it. She stared at him. Her face was unreadable. Then, with her voice calm, even soft, she replied, You think I need redemption? No, Terrence said, walking toward the door. But your legacy might. The next morning, headlines exploded with a new shift. Halberg CO backs licensing deal with Miles. Board approves foundation initiative. And in a sealed envelope on Vanessa's desk, left without a name, was a 6-word note in familiar handwriting. The moment wasn't televised. There were no fireworks, no sweeping drones or commercial countdowns. Just an overcast sky, over a small Nevada test field, a dusty podium, and a small crowd of engineers, regulators, investors, and skeptics, all here to see if Terrence Miles could do something no one like him had ever done in aerospace history. Launch a self-designed green propulsion engine in real-time solo. The TM1X stood quiet behind him, mounted to a flight-ready frame. It didn't look like much. Matte silver plating, minimal external wiring, and a low-pressure intake system that took months to refine. But beneath its surface was an innovation most aerospace teams hadn't yet cracked. It wasn't just a cleaner turbine. It was a rethink of how engines consumed energy altogether. Zero emissions vertical lift, adaptive torque modulation, ambient temperature ignition cycles, all designed by one man, who once had to bring his own tools to work because Halberg wouldn't upgrade his set. Terrence stepped forward, voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the field. This engine wasn't born from power, he said. It was born from being ignored. Silence. Then a slow ripple of applause. Some clapped out of curiosity. Others out of awe. But a few? They clapped out of guilt. Across the country, live streams buzzed on muted screens. At an aerospace research lab in Atlanta, a group of black engineering students leaned forward, eyes wide. In New York, a union rep whispered to his colleagues, This changes everything. In a DC boardroom, an FAA committee watched carefully, knowing they would be the ones holding the final stamp. And in her quiet penthouse, Vanessa Halberg watched too. Not with rage, but with something worse. Recognition. She was no longer watching the man who embarrassed her. She was watching what she could never become. As Terrence approached the control station, Ruby and Julian flanked the side monitors. Wind picked up. The test window opened. Terrence took a breath. Initializing TM1. The ignition blinked blue. A gentle hum. Then a louder vibration. The crowd hushed as the frame lifted. 4 feet 6, then 9. No smoke. No flame. No shudder. Just a seamless rise. Like it was gliding on air. He'd done it. He had made the future with parts no one else valued. In a place no one else looked, under a name, the system tried to erase. For 10 minutes the engine hovered, turned, recentered, landed. No failures. All specs passed. When it was over, the FAA observers walked toward him slowly. One of them, an older man in a gray overcoat, extended a sealed envelope. "We'll notify you in 72 hours, he said. "But between you and me," he leaned closer, "I've never seen anything that clean in my life." Terrence nodded, heart pounding. Not with ego, with purpose. Later that night, Terrence sat alone in his garage, the engine quiet beside him, glowing slightly under the dim fluorescence. Julian and Ruby were across town doing interviews. His sister had sent him a single text. Daddy would have cried. "I'm already crying enough for both of us." But Terrence didn't feel triumph. Not yet, because he knew the truth. Success wouldn't make them forget who tried to break him. And it wouldn't stop the system from doing it again. To someone else. He opened his notebook. The same one he'd carried since year 1, at Hallberg. Still smudged with grease, dog-eared at the corners. On the next blank page, he wrote, TM2, Modular Design Initiative. And then beneath it, in smaller letters, this time, no one builds alone. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a panel convened inside a secure FAA decision room. Files lined the table, names, metrics, video analysis, background checks. At the top of the pile, Terrence A. Miles, independent engineer. Beside it, a second folder, unrequested, unsolicited, from Hallberg Aviation's legal team. Inside it were red-marked passages trying to stall the patent's approval. Not based on evidence, just concern. Concern over the precedent this might set. Unsupervised mechanical design. Rapid public exposure.
Non-corporate vetting chain.
But the chairwoman of the panel, a black woman who once interned under white supervisors, who forgot her name for 6 months, pushed the folder aside. His engine doesn't just meet the standard, she said. It raises it. No one objected. The vote began. At Hallberg headquarters, Vanessa sat in the now empty corner office. Her name was still on the door. For now, but her calendar had no meetings. Her calls had no return. Her future, no anchor. She scrolled through the FAA site, refreshing the page every hour. Nothing yet, until she received a single text from Martin Doyle. It read, he changed the language in the industry handbook. Effective immediately. And below it a screenshot. FAA Class Recode. Engine Certification Category. Subtitle added, Independently Developed Units, Tier 1B, with a footnote. This designation honors and recognizes the independent engineering breakthrough of TM1X. Pioneered by Terrence Miles. Vanessa didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply closed the screen and whispered, they renamed the code after him. But just as Terrence was closing his garage for the night, his phone buzzed. A new email. Subject, Joint Acquisition Offer. Confidential. From NASA. The meeting wasn't public. No press. No photos. No microphones. Just 2 chairs inside a private conference room at the top floor of a clean tech campus in Palo Alto. A building Terrence now partially owned through a joint innovation deal with a federal aviation firm. She requested it. Through her attorney. Through back channel. No media spin. No demands. Just one sentence. I need 10 minutes. Alone. No PR. No cameras. Just me and Terrence. At first he didn't respond. Not out of malice, but because he didn't know what to say to someone who'd spent months trying to erase the very thing she now wanted to meet with. But eventually, curiosity won out.
Not for closure.
For clarity. Because something had shifted. Not in her headlines, but in her eyes. The way she looked in the rare photos from the Foundation's press conferences. The ones she attended quietly after resigning. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was watching. She arrived 5 minutes early. No entourage. No assistant. No folder in hand. Just Vanessa in a charcoal dress and flats. Hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger, but also smaller. Terrence stood when she entered. No handshake. She nodded. Silence held the space between them. Then she spoke. Congratulations. He raised an eyebrow. You mean on the engine or surviving the sabotage attempts? Both. He nodded once. Slow. Thank you. More silence. She exhaled and looked out the window at the courtyard below, where interns clustered near smart surface prototypes. I remember the first time I saw you in the hangar, she said. You were under that Gulf Stream, lying flat on your back, holding a pressure valve like it was delicate, like it could break the world. Terrence said nothing. I told myself, he's quiet, he's good, let him stay quiet. He leaned forward. Because quiet meant controllable? No, she said, facing him now. Because quiet meant invisible. And that was easy. A pause. That's what I'm here to say. She swallowed hard. I was wrong. Deeply. Repeatedly. And I think I always knew it. But I didn't care enough to stop. I didn't need to. That's what power is, right? Her voice cracked just slightly. It lets you be wrong over and over without consequence. Until someone like you refuses to play your part. Terrence's face stayed still. Unreadable. She continued. I didn't just underestimate you. I dismissed you. I used your silence to feed my confidence. And when the world finally listened to you, I did what women like me have been trained to do in business. I protected myself first. A beat passed. She looked down at her lap. I don't want your forgiveness. I came to say it out loud, so I can't pretend I didn't know, so I can't rewrite the story later. He studied her. And what do you want from me now? She looked up. I want to work for you. The room went still. Terrence blinked once. Slow. What? Not as a CEO, not as an executive, as a contributor, consultant, researcher. I want to lend what I know to something bigger than myself. Quietly. This time, no front page, no bio lines. He leaned back, stunned. You want me to hire you? I want to build again. But this time, right. And you're doing that. You're not just proving people wrong. You're building something that makes them better. Terrence was silent for a long time. Then, you tried to end my career. You turned me into a punchline, weaponized a joke, and then tried to bury me with edited footage. She nodded. I know. You tried to patent my work. I know that too. So why should I trust you now? She didn't flinch. Because I have nothing left to sell. And for the first time, that makes me useful. For a long time, Terrence said nothing. He thought about the hangar, the jokes, the silence, the moments she could have chosen differently, and didn't. But he also thought about the thousands of engineers who looked like him, who'd never even gotten to the part where they were disrespected, because they were never seen at all. He thought about building something so future-facing, so unshakably excellent, that even the people who mocked him wanted to learn from it. And then he said, you can contribute, but on my terms. She nodded quickly. No press, no platform. You don't speak for the engine, the foundation or the firm. You're there to learn, advise, or walk. Understood? Yes. He stood, meeting over. As she gathered her purse, she paused near the door. Terrence? He turned. I meant it. You were never just a mechanic. He held her gaze. You're right, he said quietly. But I didn't need you to believe it for it to be true. Outside, she walked down the hallway slowly, not with the confident click of heels, but with the measured pace of someone who'd been humbled by the very thing she once controlled. Terrence watched her go, then turned back to the window. His reflection merged with the sky. Not as a mechanic, not even as a mogul, but as something new. Back in his office, Julian scrolled through the inbox and whistled. NASA, MIT, Boeing. Everyone wants a piece of this engine. Terrence barely looked up. Let them wait. You good? Terrence nodded. Just finished a meeting. With her? Yeah. Julian raised an eyebrow. She asked for a check or a confession. Neither. She asked for a job. Julian froze. You serious? She'll contribute, quietly. If she can do that, fine. You think she'll stick to that? Terrence looked out at the city. I don't know, but I'm not building this company around what I fear people might do. I'm building it on what I know people can become. That night, he received one final package. No sender listed. Inside, a framed letter, yellowed with age. Written in from an unknown black aviation engineer. Rejected from 4 companies. The last line read, someday someone will build something that can't be ignored, not because of who they know, but because it works too well to be buried. Let them fly. Signed at the bottom, J. Miles Sr. When Vanessa's counsel delivered her offer through formal channels, chapters of legal contracts, equity splits, and PR safeguards, Terrence read it carefully in his office, late at night. The offer was generous in numbers, modest in trust. She wanted equity in the TM1 project. She asked for co-branding. She insisted on stages and photo ops. She wanted credit. He laid down the stack of papers, closed his eyes and remembered when she had said, in the hangar, after the emergency landing. Maybe I'll marry you. That smirk, that reckless arrogance. He would not marry her. But he would do something wilder. He would prove that legacy is not inherited, but built, not lent, but earned. And he would build something that outlived headlines, scandals, and power plays. Weeks later, at the grand opening of the Miles Engineering and Innovation Foundation, he stood at the podium in a wide, echoing hall filled with donors, scholars, students, engineers, and media. A polished logo glowed behind him, Miles Wings, named after his mother Doris Miles, who died quietly years ago, never allowed into the spotlight, yet instilling in Terrence the belief that you build even when no one is watching. He wore a sharp but simple suit, no gold cufflinks, no showpieces, just the name tag, founder and lead engineer. His sister sat in the front row, tears of pride in her eyes. Ruby, Julian, and a host of new faces, young black engineers, sat around him, some in custom lab jackets with his foundation's emblem. He began. Thank you all for believing that learning, innovation, and equity belong together. This foundation is not a response to injustice. It is an affirmation that we can build beyond it. The applause was strong, reverent. Not because he was famous, because he was real. Then he laid out the roadmap: mentorship programs, training labs in underserved communities, scholarships, patent support, workshop tours, public-private partnerships. He announced a $50 million endowment seed, partly from TM1 licensing, partly from early patrons. He looked around the hall, scanning faces. Then toward the back, where a reserved row stood, a single seat, kept empty, with a placard. Reserved V. Halberg, guest of honor. He didn't expect her, but he left space. After the ribbon cutting, the gala shifted to champagne, soft lighting, and hushed conversations. The press circled like moths. Cameras flashed, conversations roared. Vanessa entered quietly, escorted by her lawyer. The room murmured. Some clapped politely, others stared. She wore a pale blue dress, understated, her expression softer, more vulnerable than most had seen in months. She carried no pride, but she carried presence. Terrence watched her from across the room. Their eyes met for a moment. He nodded faintly. She inclined her head. No applause, no speech, just acknowledgement. Later, after speeches and toasts, a young woman approached Terrence, a scholarship recipient. He knelt to speak with her, asked about her work, listened. Photographers caught the moment. Then the MC announced, a special presentation, a question for our founder. Vanessa walked forward as well. No microphone, just step. A tabloid interviewer on stage, camera trained, asked, Mr. Miles, now that you've built so much, and you've declined a lifetime offer, did you ever love Vanessa Halberg? Because many of us wondered if that was more than a challenge back in the hangar. A hush fell. Terrence's gaze swept the room. The engineers, the students, the donors, his sister. He looked at Vanessa. She held her breath. No mask, no shield. He smiled quietly, and then said clearly, softly, I never loved her the way people imagine love, but I loved what she taught me. Shock rippled through the hall. Cameras clicked. The press leapt. Some mouths gaped. Some nodded, tearful. Vanessa's face lost color just for an instant, then closed over into neutrality. Then Terrence continued. She taught me that being invisible is a choice, when we let them be blind to what's in front of them. She taught me that betrayal can demand greatness. She taught me to build what cannot be erased, even if those who saw feel they lost something. But what she couldn't teach was how to lead with humility. That came from the ones who believed I existed before she noticed me. The room was silent, and in that silence, history shifted. After the gala, in the behind-scenes high corridor, Vanessa approached him. She stood close, voice low. You did more tonight than any court or headline ever could. He listened. She added, I'm sorry, doesn't matter now. But I hope the foundation becomes something larger than the war we had. He nodded. No embrace, no apology accepted, but acknowledgement. He guided her toward the exit. Cameras rolled. Reporters urged her for a quote. She shook her head and remained silent. As Terrence walked back into the gala hall, his sister grabbed his arm. They asked for your autograph. On stage. You're bigger than this moment, T. He smiled at her and said, built for more. Weeks passed. Miles Wings launched several pilot labs in Detroit, Atlanta, Baltimore. Student engineers built drones, propulsion kits, sustainable energy modules. all under Terrence's direct oversight. His foundation partnered with universities, NASA labs, and private aerospace firms. TM1 licensing deals matured. The engine began entering small commercial UAV and vertical lift contracts. Vanessa's company faded from headlines, replaced by apology tours, plotting lawsuits, and restructuring announcements. Some of her former allies spoke in support, or tried to, but the public mood had shifted. They no longer needed to watch her. They watched what Terrence was making. In boardrooms and classrooms alike, people quoted what he said at the gala. "I loved what she taught me." It became a phrase posted as a moral signpost, that growth was possible beyond injury, that respect was a building process, not a demanding position. One evening, Terrence stood alone in his new Wings Foundation lab. Late night, the echo of humming machines, the soft glow of monitors. He pressed his thumbprint to the secure vault. Inside, files from Hallberg's legal offers, the archived hidden footage, letters from students, patent documents, the framed 1974 letter from his father. His phone buzzed. He glanced. Incoming. NASA acquisition letter. He didn't open. Not yet. He walked over to the framed letter from J. Miles Sr. He touched the signature. "Let them fly." He whispered into the empty lab. "We flew." And then steps echoed behind him. He turned. Vanessa stood in the doorway. No entourage. No camera. Just her. She held something in her hand. A single thin folder. He looked at it. It had no branding. She took a deep breath, then said softly, "I kept a copy of everything you ever asked for, of every contract you rejected, of every moment you weren't seen." She paused. "I don't expect you to open it tonight, but I want you to know, I left everything in it for you, should you ever need proof I tried in the end." He nodded. "Thank you." She turned slowly, as if laying down an unspoken piece. But before she left, she turned back, looked at him directly, and said, "There's one more thing you don't know." Terrence's heart skipped. "What's that?" he asked. She walked out. The door clicked. He stared at the closed door, the echo fading. In the folder she'd left something. And when he finally opened it, the content would change everything again. Because in that folder was a single document, typed but unsigned. Proposed National Infrastructure Agreement, NASA and Hallberg Aviation and Miles Wings confidential terms, and a cover page that read, "Basis for public-private acquisition of Miles Wings technology, contingent upon sustained control of Hallberg board seats." In other words, the next move was not an apology or surrender. It was a merger. A merger that threatened to fold his foundation under the very corporate empire he once dethroned. He stood in silence, because in that moment, the greatest challenge wasn't building. It was choosing whether to join. Stories like Terrence's don't just happen in boardrooms and hangars, they happen every day, in silence, where brilliance goes unseen, and dignity gets mocked. If you've ever been overlooked, doubted, or dismissed because of who you are, you already know the cost. Type yes if you believe respect should never depend on skin color. And subscribe if this story broke your heart. It wasn't a courtroom revelation or a viral confrontation. It wasn't shouted or spun with fire and fury. It was simply released. On a quiet Thursday morning, Terrence uploaded the full, unedited footage from his hidden camera, the one Vanessa's team didn't know existed. No voiceover, no hashtags, no opinion, just facts. The time-stamped clip began with him walking into the hangar at 8:41 p.m., pausing to check a message on his phone. He stood still for 9 seconds. No tools, no movement toward the Jetstream 9. Then the figure appeared, slight, nervous, head low, wearing Hallberg aviation credentials on a black lanyard. The man crouched beside the engine panel, pulled a compact drill, opened the access port, adjusted something, and left. No hesitation, no disguise. The camera caught a clear shot of his face as he passed under the auxiliary lights. Ethan Voss, a private technician hired directly by Vanessa 6 months earlier, brought on for discreet asset maintenance, after her VP of engineering was dismissed. The same Ethan who'd never been assigned to that aircraft. The same Ethan now at the center of a PR inferno. Within 30 minutes of the upload, Hallberg Aviation's media firewall collapsed. News networks interrupted programming to run the footage. Legal analysts called it proof of deliberate defamation and reckless manipulation. Aerospace outlets questioned how a company of Hallberg's size could allow or orchestrate such tampering. And investors, they fled hard. By 3:00 p.m., Hallberg's stock dropped. By 5 p.m. it crossed. By close of market, the company had lost $2 billion in value. But the financial loss wasn't the real story. It was the who and how. Because the man in the footage wasn't just any employee. He was Vanessa's shadow hire. And the footage proved she either knew what he was doing, or had no control over the people doing it in her name. Inside Halberg headquarters, the silence was worse than shouting. No one said her name aloud. But Vanessa could feel it vibrating in every hallway, every boardroom, every Slack message dripping with legal speak and HR-cleared statements. They'd gone from calling her a visionary to calling her a liability. And she couldn't stop the spiral. She stared at her reflection in the conference room's floor-to-ceiling glass wall, the city lights behind her flickering like broken stars. Callie entered without a word and placed a printed article in front of her. A mechanic's eye catches what billions couldn't. Vanessa didn't touch it. She didn't need to. The headline alone was enough. At the same time, Terrence sat in the back of Julian's car outside a local FAA office in Henderson. His patent application was in review. His prototype had been submitted for independent testing. His personal life, once under siege, had finally found a moment to breathe. But what haunted him wasn't the company's collapse. It was the question still echoing in his mind. What if there hadn't been a second camera? What if he hadn't installed that hidden feed after the earlier system glitch? What if the truth, his truth, had no footage to prove it? Would anyone have believed him? Would it have mattered? Julian looked at him through the rearview mirror. You okay? Terrence didn't answer at first. Then, what happens when the lie almost wins? Julian took a long breath. Then you thank God it didn't, and make sure the next man doesn't need proof to be believed. Terrence nodded, but it felt like a hollow victory. Later that evening, as the footage continued to spread and stock prices continued to fall, Vanessa stood alone on the 48th floor of her penthouse, the lights of Las Vegas now blurring into haze. She'd made calls all afternoon. None had returned. Her lawyer was unavailable. Her PR firm had recommended independent review.
The board?
They hadn't even included her on the calendar invite for the 7 p.m. special session. They were pushing her out, and she knew it. She poured a glass of something dark, stared into it, then set it down untouched. Because nothing burned like being outmaneuvered by the very person you tried to erase. Back in the garage, Ruby burst through the side door with wide eyes and a tablet in hand. They've confirmed it, she said breathlessly. Terrence looked up. The FAA has officially acknowledged TM1 as a qualified prototype, pending final phase testing. You're in. You're officially in. He didn't smile. Not yet, because he'd been holding on to another message, a final one that arrived earlier that day. An anonymous tip. Not about Vanessa, not about sabotage, but about intellectual theft. Specifically a patent filed for a propulsion system, suspiciously similar to his logged 3 weeks ago, under a dummy corporation, out of Delaware. He handed the message to Ruby. They tried to get ahead of me, he said quietly. Even after the footage, even after everything. She read the file.
This shell company the lawyer attached used to work for Halberg's legal team.
Julian looked up from across the room. You think it was her last move? Terrence nodded. If she can't beat me publicly, she's gonna try and own me privately. Ruby's face darkened. Then we fight that one too. But Terrence was already one step ahead. He pulled out a flash drive from his coat pocket. What's that? Julian asked. Terrence plugged it into the laptop. A set of files opened. Designs, iterations, and time-stamped video clips, documenting every stage of the TM1's development, beginning 2 years prior to any Halberg filing. Proof, Terrence said, that she didn't just underestimate me. He looked up, eyes hard now. She underestimated how well I prepare. As he shut the laptop, his phone lit up. An unknown number. He picked up, voice cautious. Terrence Miles speaking. A voice female, clipped, almost regretful. Replied, You don't know me, but I used to be her lawyer. And I have something you need to see, before they make their final move. Now Vanessa Halberg's face sat between words like sabotage, lawsuit, resignation, and racial retaliation. The headlines no longer carried her name with reverence. The veneer had cracked. The empire was hemorrhaging. And still, Vanessa did not flinch. She wore her silence like armor. Sharp suits, tighter smiles, eyes cold enough to turn breath into vapor. Halberg Aviation faced 4 federal investigations. Securities fraud, internal sabotage, corporate defamation, and whistleblower retaliation. Major contractors pulled back, Shareholders called emergency votes. International clients. Once her leverage issued formal boycotts, until executive accountability was addressed. No one interrupted her. I will not be apologizing. Inside the boardroom, she stood before the remaining executives. Expression controlled, voice like steel sharpened by denial. I won't validate a false narrative designed to paint me as a villain for enforcing standards. Martin Doyle, the COO, stared at the table, fingers interlocked. Terrence Miles, she continued, is a skilled mechanic. I never said otherwise. But what he's done here, with the public, with the press, with his selective leaks, is emotional exploitation disguised as justice. He has weaponized sympathy. Another sipped his water slowly, deliberately. That sentence hung in the air, thick and accusatory. One board member shifted in her chair. Martin finally spoke. Vanessa, you're losing the room. She turned toward him, jaw tight. Then they were never with me. Outside, protesters had gathered for the third straight day. They didn't chant violently. They didn't block entrances. They simply held signs that sliced deeper than megaphones ever could. Apologize, don't reframe. Listen when we speak. Terrence never appeared at the protests. He never endorsed them. Never tweeted support. But the protesters didn't need his presence. He had become a symbol without asking, and Vanessa had become one without noticing. Built it. Mocked him. Tried to bury him. We're not engine parts. Vanessa didn't look up. Let them go. New email from HR, she said. We've had 19 internal resignations this week. Callie approached her desk in the executive suite, visibly nervous. And we've received an email from the FAA. They've fast-tracked approval for TM1 under the Clean Lift initiative. It'll go public tomorrow. Still nothing. Callie hesitated. Then, bracing herself, added, he's being invited to keynote the Global Urban Aviation Conference next month. Your old slut. Vanessa's fingers twitched, but she remained silent. It wasn't unusual. He'd been with her since year 3 of the company's formation. Her right hand in most mergers. Her executor for every acquisition. He was quiet in public, firm in private, and loyal. Until now. Later that afternoon, Martin Doyle requested a closed-door meeting. She didn't blink. I tried to buy you time, he continued. But they're not waiting for another headline. They want separation. Now. Vanessa, he said, voice low, the board is preparing a motion to remove you. They're cowards. They're scared of collapse. Separation from what? She asked. From a woman who built this company from scratch? Or from the uncomfortable optics of what that company turned into under pressure? They're capitalists. She turned to the window, arms folded. Do you believe I sabotaged that jet? No, Martin replied without hesitation. A beat. Do you believe I told Ethan to frame Terrence? No, he said again. But you let the story fester. You left space for doubt, and you used it. I think you should have remembered he had nothing to lose, and you had everything to protect. Vanessa turned back to him. You think I should have apologized? He let that sit. She crossed the room slowly, poured herself a glass of water, and took a long sip. No, she said softly. If I go down, I'm not signing anything. They want me gone? Fine. But they'll do it publicly. They'll own that decision. I won't die quietly to make them feel better. Then, and now, they want a statement of accountability signed, or they'll vote to remove you by end of week. Back in the garage, Terrence and Ruby watched the TM1 test again, now verified by 2 external firms. The engine was certified for demo flight. Orders were starting to line up. A manufacturing partnership had been offered, anonymously. Then almost with sadness, he said, That's your pride talking, not your legacy. Martin studied her. We traced the patent filings, he said. The Delaware Shell Corporation. Dead end. But guess who's listed as a silent consultant? Vanessa? Ruby guessed. Julian paced nearby. Julian nodded. Can't prove her role directly. But someone used her former firm to try and register a near-exact copy of your design. Terrence leaned forward. Then we beat them to it. You did, Julian said. But the real win was the shift. You're not the guy she mocked anymore. You're the guy who moved past